Please welcome Daniel R. Stein, the Branch Chief for Cybersecurity Education and Awareness in the Department of Homeland Security's Office of Cybersecurity and Communications, and panelists for Balancing Act, Privacy and Innovation.
So good afternoon, everybody. Oh, glad to see this works. My name is Dan Stein. I'm the Branch Chief for Cybersecurity Education and Awareness at the Department of Homeland Security. And since plenty has been said about the government so far today, I want to say that yes, indeed, I am from the government, but no, in fact, I'm not here to help. I'm here to facilitate. I'm here to moderate. And the individuals who are here on the stage, hopefully, are here to help you. We're here to talk about privacy and innovation. And this is a topic that at least has been of a great deal of interest to me, because in the security world, especially when we go out and meet members of industry, but also those who are in the academic sector and rely on industry or support industry as the true innovator in the security realm, many of them will argue that regulation, whether it's government regulation or regulation imposed by the consumers, actually stifle innovation. Now, I don't necessarily agree with that, but we're here to discuss that topic. When it comes to privacy, is it possible for innovation to take a hit because the consumer demands greater privacy? Some would say yes, and others would say no. So my first question to all of you is how you feel on that topic. Do you think that privacy stifles innovation? And if the answer is yes or the answer is no, please provide some examples and also introduce yourself.
Okay, I can start. Hi, everyone. My name is Elkina. I am a vice chair, co-founder of Women in Security and Privacy. It's a nonprofit organization. By the way, we have some materials outside if you're interested to learn more. And I'm also a partner at Aleada Consutling, a boutique privacy and data protection firm in the Bay Area. So I will start sharing that I've been thinking about this question a lot, especially today, and a lot of us shared the opinions about privacy and innovation. And I feel like we're thinking about it in the wrong context. And I'm not surprised, because there's so many regulations establishing new guidelines and requirements on businesses. Engineers feel like they're limited with what they can design, and consumers feel frustrated because there's so many things they need to be aware of. And education is still getting up to speed in our community. A lot of things. But I feel like if we think about it, it's a fake conflict, in my opinion. So it's there, and it's challenging, but it's happening. Let's just look at this. It's challenging for everyone. Regulations, for example. Before innovation drove regulations. And now regulations actually driving innovation in one way. Being in privacy for 11 years and legal and compliance for 20 plus years, I've seen a shift in the last 5-7 years, how regulations are approaching privacy and innovation specifically. Look at the GDPR or Federal Trade Commission. They are focusing on privacy by design and allowing to use data for research and other scientific purposes. So this is a shift. So before we were not on the same page. If we look at companies, we've seen a lot of companies in our practice that they come with not just looking at privacy as a good hygiene, because they understand this is a good way to mitigate their risk internally, but they also tell us we want to use privacy because they get it. Privacy sells. A lot of companies come and ask to help to utilize their privacy practices to sell their products. And this is very helpful. I'll give you an example, a personal experience. So I don't trust healthcare in US and abroad because one time I was like 15 years ago, I requested my medical records and I felt violated how much information the doctor enclosed from my appointment. It was just not even relevant to anything about my health or anything else. I disputed that piece saying that's not relevant. I don't think it should be part of it. It's nothing serious. It's nothing. There's nothing to hide. But I felt like, why would you include this personal information in my health records that everyone can view? Not everyone would care, but it's mine. And my request was declined. I was like, okay, that's fine. So now I go to the doctor's office. I say yes, no, and nothing more, because I'm afraid. I don't know how it's going to be used against me in the future, especially healthcare is changing. But I shared the most valuable health information with 23andMe because I trusted the company. And the company not only shared what they were doing, but why. I think sharing their why in the business, it's very important for innovation, because it helps people to understand where you're coming from and sharing the story. If you don't know about 23andMe, the company was founded because the founder had some health issues in the family. And she wanted to help others to be more proactive about their health. And it was close to my heart. So I think companies are taking advantage of privacy innovation, and they change their practices internally and externally. And I think Michelle talked earlier about engineers, and companies train their internal teams around privacy and employees, because you're raising your champions, and I think it's important for innovation. They talk when you're not in the room, and basically, they're doing your work as privacy experts while you're asleep. So there is a shift, and I noticed that, and I think it's extremely important for businesses to innovate where you have champions across different teams. And when it comes to consumers are becoming more and more aware of privacy, and they demand it. So I feel like there is a good alliance among three players.
Excellent.
Well, shall I? Well, hi, everybody. I'm Eve Mailer. I'm with ForgeRock, which is a digital identity company specializing in identities that you're not the boss of, like consumers and customers. And I'm on our CTO team, and I focus on our privacy and consent innovation agenda. And so I do think that regulation helps innovation in the area that responds to the regulation. So there is that. The nature of regulation, I will say, it's hard for it to imagine technology that goes beyond the era of the regulation. It's just the nature of the beast. Even as much as it will try to look into the future, it's hard. Crystal balls tend to not be very clear. But I'm fascinated by GDPR in particular, because even though it has the phrase data protection in it, and I know that data protection in EU means what we would call data privacy, it's much more aspirational than what I like to call the fetal crouch of don't let my data out. It's got elements of more layers above that. I was telling Michelle and others earlier today. There's the data protection layer, and elements of when you have to do breach notification. There's elements of data privacy, data transparency, of tell people why you want their data, tell people what you know about them, and it's now free to do a subject access request. Okay, that's an impact on a business. And there's elements of data control, which is especially aspirational. That's where the intersection of, I want to put a hashtag in front of this, digital transformation, and that's an innovation word, and privacy, not just a compliance meaning of privacy, but a user trust meaning of privacy come in. So you have to look, when you're a business and you have risk leads and you have business owners having to come together, you have to look at the intersection of those to see if you have a viable product. And I was just reminding myself of what happened to Mattel when they put out that Aristotle product. They got as far as putting out the Aristotle product, got it to market, and then EFF went nuts, maybe rightly so, and parents went nuts, maybe rightly so, and said, are you crazy? You actually think that, a baby monitor that talks to kids and collects all this data, do you think that's really viable? And they went, maybe you're right, and they took it off the market. So that was a case of looking at the intersection of digital transformation, which is what, smart home products and IoT, consumer IoT products are about, and user trust risks or gaps, never mind the compliance implications in that case, are about. You need to look at the intersection and manage those. That's what we need to talk about when it comes to innovation and privacy. And so I think there absolutely can be innovation with privacy in the picture. And that's where I think, Elena, your story of 23andMe, it's about innovation looking after, you have to answer the user's questions, the consumer's questions.
What have we observed as far as the consumer demand? And I think this certainly, Elena, speaks to your example. Are consumers truly demanding greater privacy?
I believe so. They do, and there is a positive aspect because they're becoming more educated. But there is also a scary aspect to me because they just are scared, but they don't know why. They don't understand why they don't want to share this information. Just like I don't know, but I don't want to. So those two, I think, hopefully they're going to merge, those two groups. But consumers becoming more and more educated, and luckily, businesses are getting more and more educated around it. For example, the studies show that if you empower consumers to make choices, they become more open to marketing and advertisement. It's shown. So a lot of companies in the marketing industry right now, they're utilizing it. They are utilizing innovation to create a mechanism for consent, where they're not just telling me, like, we're going to collect this marketing data and they're going to send you emails. But they're going to make a story. I was like, well, we're changing lives of numerous people because we want to do X, Y, and Z. So I think it's another way to educate consumers, and a lot of pressure on businesses nowadays to continue this. So the gap between those two buckets of consumers who just don't want to share without knowing why, and savvy consumers is getting, hopefully.
So would you agree? It sounds like there would be a market draw for greater privacy if there is a link between greater consumer confidence in industries that have greater privacy. Therefore, those consumers are more likely to buy products from companies that are offering higher levels of privacy. That's an incentive for those companies to offer a higher level of privacy. That would be the basic economic approach to all of this. Do you see that happening?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm a little bit dubious. I mean, I think maybe at the margin. I mean, Alison, maybe.
So you're asking if companies will buy products that...
I'm saying, I'm taking the argument one step further to say, and actually to go back to a quote, Michelle, I hope I'm quoting you correctly, good privacy is good for business. Yes, okay. That will be proven through the greater sales on the part of a company that offers higher level of privacy versus a company that does not, because the consumer, theoretically, will be buying their products from those who are offering greater levels of privacy. And do you see that trend happening?
Oh, I definitely see that trend, especially in the B2B market, for sure, because especially with the new regulations, GDPR coming up, companies want to make sure that the products that they're buying, are going to be GDPR ready or compliant, or, are they HIPAA compliant, or do they allow the company to perform at a HIPAA compliant, ready level? So I think that the more that a company can build to a regulation, or the more that a company can instill that culture in their workforce to build to that level, they'll be able to sell and differentiate themselves and go to that pace.
I want to be clear about what I said in case people are like, you're against privacy. I think good privacy is absolutely good for business. There's ways in which it reduces friction to doing business. There's ways in which your information supply chain needs to be clean. I'm a standards wonk, and I believe in standards and commoditizing a certain part of business in order to get you to new heights in the parts that are differentiating. What I mean by what I was starting to say is that there may be at the margin a few people, and I'm sometimes one of them, who might prefer the paid version of a mobile app where it has certain different privacy policies versus the free version. You certainly all know that, you always pay. You pay in money, you pay in attention, you pay in data, or 2 or 3 of those things, right? But privacy in and of itself as a feature is rarely a differentiator for a consumer. Convenience and value, whatever those things are for the thing you're offering them, are differentiators. And trust is a thing that's easily lost. So to me, those are the things you have to stir in your pot to figure out what to offer. So it's good privacy is good for business in a lot of ways, but I don't see, we're going to make the privacy settings easier to use as the thing that's going to turn somebody necessarily away. Because, I don't know, I posted a blog post on Stay Safe Online last week with what I called 3 hard rules to avoid privacy and trust fails. And it wasn't, things like make your privacy policy easier to read, because that at the margin doesn't make the difference.
You know what, actually, I wanted to continue on your last point. There are a few studies that were done around privacy policies, and one of them, one question asked consumers how you feel about the company, and if you trust the company, if you have a very detailed policy with all information you need to know. And the second question was if you have a very high-level policy that kind of broad, and it was kind of 50-50. In fact, the policy that is very detailed with all information was more confusing to consumers. And they said, I don't know if it was helpful to me to read it. I got more confused and feeling like something is hidden from me. So, and when it comes to companies, I don't envy them, because they have to find this balance. How much information is enough? And, yes, there is a common rule to draft those policies for the 6th grade, 5th grade level, very simple bullet points, and FTC has great guidelines, but it's an interesting point. It's like, I don't know.
They're all wrong. The one thing I go to them for is what's your business model? How do you make money? And they all have these standard boilerplate. And what I want to know is the thing that your app exists to do collects data from me. Well, what do you do with that data? Not your cookie policy.
It's funny that you say that, because there's always a difference between on a website they have a privacy policy, and a lot of times people's privacy policies only address the data that they collect as you're visiting the website, but not the data they collect as they do business. And that's one thing that in all the companies I've worked at, we've always stressed is having a data handling policy. In fact, I actually learned that when I worked at Cisco many years ago. And a data handling policy is different than just a general privacy policy, because a data handling policy addresses in your business model, how do you handle data? What do you do with the data after you've collected it and processed it as part of what you do for business? It's not just the data you collect on your website when someone visits. That's just a tiny speck of the data that comes in. And so as a consumer, and even when you do, as a business owner, or whenever you're doing business with a vendor, you should always find out your partners and your vendors what they're doing with that data as well, because it's important to know that.
They should just show you the pie chart of, okay, money, attention, data. And if I pay you money, how does it change,
Right? Because I can't tell you how many times we've looked at a vendor's privacy policy and they say, yes, we have all the information you need, and it doesn't say anything at all what they do with the data.
And just one note on the business side, I noticed that a lot of companies right now, when they're updating their privacy policy on the website, they're not only working on that page, they're actually adding privacy to their vision and mission and about us and what we're doing, which is an amazing tip that I would like to share with other businesses. Think about it. Not only think about your website privacy policy, which very often doesn't cover anything else outside, but it's a good way to add it, just to share about your business practices. But see if there is any way to add privacy to your story, which is across your webpage. It's an incredible tool to build trust for consumers as well as your business partners. Because when you go there and you feel like people thought about it, they care, your attitude changes. And it transfers into dollar value, into your contracts and additional business. Huge difference.
Certainly, this panel is very optimistic, and it's great to see.
It's got us on a good day.
I live in the future.
I'd like to switch gears a little bit, just to take this back to the platform on which all of us are operating. Isn't it a little bit ironic that we're talking about privacy when the platform was never designed for privacy? The internet was it was set up to exchange information. It was not set up as a secure means to exchange information. So now that we are all, for better or for worse, tied into the internet, and there is going to be no escape, this conversation on privacy is certainly important. But how do we get from the point at which we take this inherently non-secure platform and we change the conversation to how the platform itself is irrelevant? That what matters is the interaction on that platform. And if commerce is collectively going in the direction of operating online, it's commerce that we should see as being secure, and not as the agents of open information sharing. Now, I hope I'm not drawing a cynical note to the optimism that we had a moment ago, but I think that that is on the mind of many consumers, that the internet is a convenience. The internet is speed. The internet means that I can go and buy shoes without having to get my, my feet sized.
I understand what you're saying, and I think that as someone who is an avid shopper online and do everything online, I think that you are kind of the navigator and the owner of your data and of your destiny online, and you have to make sure that you're just aware of every vendor you use and where your data is going. I think that's one of the lessons that we've probably learned today, right, that everyone has really shared with us. You can't control everything, but you just have to be aware and know where you're going and try as much as you can to understand all the different services that you're using. I think that, and if you interact with companies that you trust, and if you've tried to read some of their privacy policies and you think you understand how they're handling your data, I think that's the most you can do. I mean, if that's the kind, if you want to be an online shopper, now if you don't want to be an online shopper and you just want to go to retail, then you can do that. But I mean, if you want to be an online shopper, then you have to kind of take that chance and just be aware and know that that's going to happen.
Well, one of the reasons I'm optimistic, I don't know, since I come from identity land, there's been progress made. You know, the internet, in identity land, we talk about how the internet doesn't have an identity layer. Identity is so connected with security and privacy. And there's been a movement over the last 15 years, and since I'm also a standards wonk, to add back standards that actually do these jobs. And it's starting to be the case that they're being used in the infrastructure that makes security happen for APIs, for the mobile apps, for the web apps, for all the infrastructure, including starting to be for IoT. You know how the IoT economy is kind of based on the API economy. And the API economy exists because we have mobile apps. It's all built on each other, and all that is there because we have this hashtag digital transformation thing going on, right? Everybody wants the data, and smart things are smart things because of the data versus dumb things. Okay, so these standards, things like OAuth and OpenID Connect, and this is how people's digital identities traverse people, websites and all that stuff. These are starting to make all this stuff more secure. Now, this is a little data view of the universe, not really a big data view, but it informs things, and it's how people can consent. It's how you start to get consent lifecycle management capabilities. So it's how you can start to inject the data subject into the conversation. And this is why I think identity is so important. It's the person's digital twin in the online context. And it actually now starts, you're from Intel, so when you have a smart thing, any kind of thing, you can start to have a hardware root of trust. This is the technical term. You can start to have device attestation, to use a really, technical term, so that that the device is what it says it is, and the person is who they say they are when they consent to their data flowing. So you can start to have this whole chain of evidence that it's really okay that they said it's all right for their data to flow. And this is why I'm optimistic. I know I live in the future, but it's starting to be a good thing.
I just want to add a quick thing that I think nowadays most of us are aware that we are online, we as human beings, that we are not consumers, we are a product. So our status change, I think it's pretty much not news to anyone. When it comes to companies, I think there is a big challenging situation for them how to kind of maintain that security and protection of data, and I think that's where innovation can help. Security, encryption, using privacy-enhancing technologies, anonymizing data, pseudonymizing data, identifying data, and again, telling people, companies that you're doing that. That's one way to make internet secure. I don't think stopping information collection practices is going to be a solution. I think no one wants it. We need big data to make our life easier. I think there are other ways how we can navigate and secure our information, and that's where the companies are here to help. again, encryption, privacy enhancing technology, privacy by design, and transparency about all your practices is a key.
Well, thank you very much. We have 30 seconds left, so I think with that, I'd just like to say thank you to our panel, and we appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.